Hi, and welcome to the IDRC Recruiting 101 module, Lesson 4, the qualifying move. The qualifying move is a necessary requirement for determining student eligibility. To be successful, recruiters must be able to properly review a student and a migratory agricultural worker's move history. This training covers what qualifying moves are and some tips for how recruiters can obtain move history. Why are qualifying moves important? Qualifying moves are important because to be eligible for the migrant education program, all students must make a qualifying move with, to join, to proceed, or as a migratory agricultural worker in order to be eligible. Recruiters must review move history and evaluate qualifying moves every day on the job. And so it's important for recruiters to be familiar with the definitions of what a qualifying move are, the regulations that cover qualifying moves, so that they can be making proper eligibility decisions while out in the field. So what is a qualifying move? According to Chapter 2, question D1 on page 20 of the non-regulatory guidance, a move is considered a qualifying move if the move occurred in the previous 36 months from the date of the interview, the move was made due to economic necessity, the move was from one residence to another residence, and if the move was made from one school district to another school district. To be a qualifying move, the move must have been completed within 36 months from the date of the eligibility interview. A move is considered to be complete when the migratory agricultural worker and the child or student are together in a new location. So worker and child may move separately, and the move is finished and complete once both the worker and child are together living in their new residence. To be a qualifying move, the move must have been made due to economic necessity. The Federal Office of Migrant Education considers economic necessity to mean that the child and worker moved because they could no longer afford to stay in their current location. You can find out more about economic necessity by reading Chapter 2, question D3 on page 20 of the non-regulatory guidance. Some examples of moving due to economic necessity include, but are not limited to, moving because work was no longer available in a previous location, moving with the reasonable expectation that work would be available in the new location, moving because the student and worker could no longer afford rent, or because the rent in the new location was cheaper. Another aspect of a qualifying move is that the move must be made from one residence to another. There is no regulatory guidance that defines what a residence is for the purpose of the migrant education program. However, the Federal Office of Migrant Education considers a residence to be a place where the student and worker live and not just visit. Apartments, hotels, houses, boats, tents, trailers, and vehicles can all be considered residences. While there are no regulations about how long a student and worker must live in a location for the place to be considered as a residence, it is important that the student and worker live or lived in the location and were not only visiting or on vacation. Many times you have families and students that move from one place to another to visit family, to go on vacation, and it's important for the recruiter to check and verify the purpose of the move and to make sure that it wasn't just a temporary stop, but they were in fact living in the new location. The last aspect of a qualifying move is that it has to be from one school district to another. For a move to be considered a qualifying move, the move must have crossed school district lines, meaning that both the worker and child cross school district lines, leaving one school district and ending up in another. You should be aware that many counties and regions around the country may have multiple school districts. It is important for recruiters to know their areas and know where school district lines are to properly distinguish when a move is a qualifying move. You may find that workers and students may make qualifying moves even within the same county as long as they're crossing school district lines. For school districts that are more than 15,000 square miles in size, the worker and child must move at least 20 miles from one residence to another for the move to be considered a qualifying move. Now let's look at an example of a student making a qualifying move. Here we can see a family in Michigan who has never worked in agriculture. Since the family has had issues finding work, on June 22nd, 2021, the father moves to Florida by himself because he had heard that there were job opportunities on a tomato farm. The father in Florida on July 3rd, 2021, begins working in the tomato fields. He begins working within 60 days of arriving in Florida and now has become a migratory agricultural worker. The father then returns to his family in Michigan when the work is finished. At this point, the family still does not qualify because the other family members have not yet moved. And so when the father returns on November 20th, 2021, even though he is a migratory agricultural worker, the students do not qualify because they have not yet made a qualifying move with the migratory agricultural worker. So on December 20th, 2021, the family moves to Chicago, Illinois to begin working in a factory. At this point, the family now qualifies for the migrant education program because they have now completed a move with the migratory agricultural worker. Because now, moving from Michigan to Chicago, Illinois, the child has moved from one residence to another, from one school district to another, due to economic necessity because they were struggling to find work, and made the move with a migratory agricultural worker. And so now the child qualifies for the migrant education program. It's important to note that the child and worker do not have to move at the same time. The worker and child can move separately from one another as long as the move is completed and the worker or child are together in that new location within 12 months. A move where the child and worker move separately is known as a to join move. The child may move to join a worker who is already living in a new residence, or the child may precede the worker to the new residence. When a to join move occurs, the recruiter must always write a comment in the COE describing why the child and worker moved separately. So when a to join move happens, it's up to the recruiter to interview the family to figure out the reason why the child and worker did not move at the same time and to properly document the reason on the COE. The reason should be clear and evident to all who read the COE. Now for some important definitions. When filling and completing out the COE, you will often hear discussed the qualifying arrival date. The qualifying arrival date is the most recent date a student has completed a qualifying move with, to join, or to precede a migratory agricultural worker or as a migratory agricultural worker themselves. You can find more information about the qualifying arrival date in the non-regulatory guidance on Chapter 2, Question E1 on page 23. The qualifying arrival date is a necessary component for the COE. Anytime a student has a new qualifying arrival date, it means they have made a new qualifying move and a new COE can be obtained. The qualifying arrival date is also important because it determines the length of eligibility for the student. A child's eligibility for the migrant education program begins on the qualifying arrival date. The child is eligible for 36 months from the qualifying arrival date. It is important for recruiters to know what the residency date is and why it is important, because many recruiters often struggle with residency dates. The residency date is the date when the child moves into the current school district that they are living in, and it is not necessarily the same as the qualifying arrival date. The qualifying arrival date is the date when the latest qualifying move is completed, whereas the residency date is the date that the child arrived in the current school district. If the move to the latest school district was not a qualifying move, then the qualifying arrival date and the residency date can be different. A child's residency date may also differ from the qualifying arrival date if the child moved before a migratory agricultural worker, or if they make a subsequent move that is not a qualifying move. A child's residency date may differ from the qualifying arrival date if they move before a migratory agricultural worker, or if they make a subsequent move that is not a qualifying move. So if the child moves to their current school district and it wasn't a qualifying move, the qualifying arrival date and the residency date may be different. You will notice that there are two different spots on the COE. Now for some tips on how to properly obtain move history while conducting an eligibility interview. A recruiter must be able to properly review student and workers' moves history during the eligibility interview in order to determine if there was in fact a qualifying move. To uncover the move history, it's important that recruiters should start with the latest move and work backwards. Remember that the move has to be made within 36 months from the date of the eligibility interview. And so you begin by working your way from the date that you were talking to the family back, trying to find their most recent move, their most recent change of residence that went from one school district to another, and continue working backwards until you have exceeded that 36 months. It's important to note that even once you get to that 36 months, it's always recommended that you continue to go back and try to find move history up for the last 5 years, because there can be times when families' remembrance or memory of dates may be a little fuzzy. And so it's best to work with the family to try to be as thorough as possible, to go back even farther than those 36 months, because it may find out later that the family is not remembering correctly the dates of their moves, and one of those dates may in fact be within that 36-month period. If you are having difficult time collecting the move history, draw a timeline out on your notes and place the moves on the timeline to help visualize the child and worker's history. Some workers and families may struggle to remember the exact dates of moves. Recruiters should always try to approximate the dates of moves the best they can and obtain at least 4 years or 48 months of move history in order to guarantee that a qualifying move was not made. Because migrant families move so frequently, recruiters may need to repeat questions multiple times in order to obtain a complete move history. Just as when we were talking about the migratory agricultural worker, it's important to work through conversations and to build up trust. And so you may have to ask questions related to move history multiple times over the course of that conversation, and more trust is built, because you may find that families' answers may change as they become more comfortable with talking to you. Similarly, it's important to note that when discussing specifically move history, family's definition of a move may differ from your definition of a move. A family may not consider moving for only 2 months to work in a different crop in a different state to be a move. And so it's important for you to ask the question in multiple ways in order to verify that no moves were made. So, for example, you can ask a family if they have moved. You can ask if they have ever left the area and come back. You can ask the family if they ever changed houses. You can ask the family if they ever spent time in another location. These are just some of the different ways that you can frame the question in order to try to get that information to determine move history. And now time for an activity. Identifying the qualifying arrival date. Go to the activity in the Recruiting 101 Lesson 4 page of the workbook. For each of the scenarios listed, identify the most recent qualifying arrival date for the migrant students in the scenario. This is great practice because as a recruiter, you will be determining qualifying arrival dates every day on the job. Go read through each scenario, take notes if need be, and identify the most recent qualifying arrival date or the most recent qualifying move made in each scenario. This completes the IDRC Recruiting 101 module, Lesson 4, the qualifying move. To continue learning, read Chapter 7, Determining Eligibility, in the National ID&R Manual located at results.ed.gov/IDR-manual. You may also take the qualifying move mini quiz to test the knowledge you have learned during this lesson. When finished, continue on to the Recruiting 101 module, Lesson 5, Getting Familiar with the COE.